you. Welcome back. So, this panel we are going to be looking at several different areas in terms of extremism and radicalisation. One of the areas that we're going to be looking at the misconceptions of Quranic text. We're going to look at the issue of media, social media, and the lack of self-belief or promotion of the core culture in host countries, and the role of the nation of foreign fundings where that takes place. The three panelists that I'm going to introduce you is Gerry Campbell. He's a former Scotland Yard Detective Chief Superintendent who independent policing, security and community safety specialist. He has done extensive work alongside diverse communities and the police service in tackling all forms of hate crime, faith crime, violence towards women, delivering the youth strategy within the community. And we have Dr. Stephanie Dorschneider, who is assistant professor in the School of Politics and International Relations. Her main research area includes violence and non-violent political activism in Middle East and political psychology. And on my left, we have Dr. Syed Mustafa Azmayesh. He's the author of the book New Researches in the Quran. He's a researcher in the field of law and theology, a jurist scholar, and an expert on Islamic misconception and Quranic misinterpretations. He is known for his research in the field of Islam, Gnosticism, and Christianity, and for his advocacy for human rights. His most notable effort has been pushed for reform within the fundamentalist regime towards the adherence of human rights values. So this is an overview of our panel, but I'm going to start with Gerry Campbell, who is going to cover the area of media, the role of media and social media, and plus more. So, please, yeah.
Okay, Mattie, thanks for that, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. There's something about the honesty of the conversation. I'm going to speak about, in part, the role of government, the role of communities, and with that, the role of the police service within communities, media, cybercrime, and what I call the why and the how factors. So we've heard a lot about, from the first panel, around the changing world. A senior police officer at Scotland Yard, soon to retire, Commander Mac Chisty, is the most senior Muslim police officer in the UK, describes extremism as the silent killer. So we've heard much about we live in a changing world, and what we're seeing is a growing change around nationalism in the UK and across Europe and elsewhere. This can give rise to extremist activity and hate crime, offending against people because of their perceptions of being different. But use the UK's experience following the outcome of the EU referendum election last year. Directly following that outcome in July 2016, there was a 41% increase in hate crime. So 5,468 hate crimes, a 41% increase in hate crime. Some people used, I say some people, perpetrators, offenders, suspects, used that outcome to legitimise and to justify their hatred towards others because of difference. The role of government is quite, I think, unmistakable. They have got a fundamental right to provide security, protect its citizens, and to promote and protect the rights and freedoms of its citizens. We will all recognise that this must include the prevention of radicalisation and extremism, the prevention of hatred, and then the prevention of terrorism. There must be something about, and we've heard from Sophie, the UK's government representative today, around the role of health, police, social workers. However, given the scale and magnitude of the problem, given the problem's depth and breadth, there is something around what I would call the professional and the moral imperative to act. I think the why of what we're doing is unmistakable. However, what is less clear is the how. How do we go about our business? How do we communicate with affected communities? Our communication and our methods of communication are absolutely vital for reasons which I'm going to go on to discuss further. However, going back to then the prevention of radicalisation, extremism, hatred and allied subject matters, it's to this end that we must need to fully understand the problem and its scale. If we only understand part of the problem, we can all ever successfully achieve and solve part of the problem. Do we fully understand extremist ideology or ideologies? The need to work with affected communities and civil society organisations is, to be absolutely frank, unmistakable as well. This cannot be, and government policy, the activity and actions of law enforcement, security services, cannot be done to affected communities. It has got to be done with and alongside those communities. There is an unmistakable partnership with communities. If we are truly searching for sustainable, longer-term solutions, we have got to work hand in glove with communities. And that's from the international perspective, and also with the diaspora communities in our respective countries across Europe. The true sustainable solutions to end, to stop and eradicate extremism rests within communities. However, I will caveat my comments by going back to some of my original comments around the absolute role that the state and our governments have to play in security and protecting the fundamental rights and freedoms of our citizens. I've already referenced my friend, Commander Mac Chisty, and I'll do so again. Mac is quite clear that, and he continues to urge community members to tackle what he calls the dangers which lurk within our community. He's absolutely clear as well that it's not about stigmatising the Muslim community. It is about joining forces. It is about working together as a cohesive partnership to ensure that radical sentiment can't and does not take root. We know that extremism presents itself in a highly camouflaged way. It is highly persuasive. It is wrapped around the distortion of Islamic scripture and text. People have been duped into believing it's part of a religious duty, with converts to Islam being at probably the highest risk of radicalisation. So this lends itself to the need for they need to be better informed about faith from established authorities and not rogue interpretations of Islam scriptures and its texts. We've heard from the first panel, and yet again I make no apologies for mentioning it again, around who are the preachers? Who are the people entering and exiting our respective countries? There is something for me around preachers, around a license to practice and a license to preach. The government, or governments, law enforcement, the police service, security organisations are not in all the spaces. They can't be. They cannot be all-seeing, and all-hearing. We can't be in all spaces. This includes people's homes, communities and community centres, faith establishments. So communities are absolutely fundamental to the protection of communities, children and vulnerable people. Some of the very people who are exposed to and are also at risk of being radicalised. Communities, frankly, must be empowered to speak out and not be browbeaten or intimidated into silence. But that applies equally to professionals. Going back to some of my original comments, there is something about the honesty of the conversation in this debate. Professionals cannot be silenced for fear of being accused of being racist, Islamophobic, and so forth. Communities cannot be silenced by individuals or organisations seeking to control their own agenda by speaking out and against moderate community members, accusing them of being spies and etc., etc. So we must be in a position to empower professionals and communities to speak out with confidence. One of the biggest threats facing the world today, alongside a number of other issues, is cybercrime. One of the most dangerous places is the internet. We've heard much on that today, and I suggest we'll probably hear a lot more on it as well. It presents one of the greatest security and overall crime threats facing us today. But of course, social media is so much a crucial part of people's daily lives now. Times newspaper then, from yesterday. Headline: Social media giants fail to tackle hatred, say MPs, Members of Parliament, UK Parliament. A direct quote in here for Amanda Rudd, the UK Government's Home Secretary. Social media platforms are being used to weaponise the most vulnerable people in our communities. Social media platforms are being used to weaponise the most vulnerable people in our communities. We have seen time and again extremist organisations using tech-savvy supporters to post their powerful messaging, their recruitment material and so forth. But we're also seeing service providers, multinational global companies, refusing to take down extremist and hate-filled material, or not taking it down quickly enough. Time is a real factor with this mode of communication. But they act as quickly as they want to when it suits them. We know that all terrorist organisations have their own specific ideology. Of course, we need to better understand them. So that's why we need to, in a really timely way, challenge it, disrupt it, remove it, and provide the truth. Cybercrime is a transnational problem which requires global, transnational, consistent, coherent action. This is not about, and cannot be about, a single country trying to take a stance against global companies. This requires transnational collective action together. To do nothing is not an option. It is good to talk, but it's much better to do. We heard from one of our law enforcement speakers on the first panel talking about the police role in crime fighting. Yes, the fundamental role of policing is about crime fighting. However, an even more fundamental role in policing is the protection of life and the prevention of crime. Protection of life and the prevention of crime. It is not just about detecting crime after it has happened, because it is too late by then. A fundamental part of the policing model in the UK is the police service working hand in glove in communities, with communities, for communities. The London policing model is absolutely wedded to working with and understanding communities. Local community panels, ward panels, forming their local priorities with their local police officers. The "you said, we did" style of campaigning, where police officers and policing by consent, or with policing by consent, are held to account by local people. This agenda has got to be about prevention and not prediction. we've heard about, we know who some of the suspects are, they've got a criminal background, their vulnerability and other factors might expose them to being radicalised. So there is something we have got to be talking about prevention and not prediction. We knew that was going to happen because why didn't we then do something about it? So timing is everything. The stark reality of it is, in closing comment, because Mattie is now passing me notes to stop, we are better together. We are better working together in and as part as effective partnerships, government, police, other law enforcement agencies, security agencies, civil society and communities, working together as an effective, collegiate, cohesive partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerry. Thank you. So, Stephanie, please.
So thank you very much for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'm assistant professor at University College Dublin, and what I do in my research is to study the motivations of individuals to pick up arms. And specifically what I do, as you can see from the slide, or maybe infer from the slide, is to study the cognitive processes by which individuals make decisions to pick up arms or to join violent groups such as ISIS. So specifically what I'm doing is to look at the perpetrator's perspective. Now, why does this matter? Why would we want to understand the perpetrator's perspective? So number one, we all know that we can never fully understand a behavior just from adopting an outside stance. That's common knowledge. Now, in the case of political violence, it's especially important to investigate the perpetrator's perspective because political violence is not a normal behavior. And because it's not a normal behavior, we like to assume, or we intuitively believe, many of us, that the people who engage in political violence cannot be normal either. Something that we think of as impossible. And in many ways, this kind of thinking is reflected in what we currently hear about the perpetrators of recent violence in Europe. They are branded as criminals or as adherents of some extremist Islamist ideologies, so some sort of outgroup. However, if we step back and if we look at the academic literature, which is what I do on a daily basis, I'm in academia, we actually find that the findings that have been obtained from scientific empirical studies suggest that these assumptions could be untrue. So there's a very large number of studies that have shown that the features that we commonly assume to be specific to individuals who engage in violence are also found in control groups of non-violent individuals. And this has led many professors, including Martha Crenshaw, and this is my next slide, to conclude that actually the outstanding common characteristic of terrorists appears to be their normality. And this is also what I found in my own research on political violence. Now let me tell you a little bit about that. And for this I have another slide, thank you. So very briefly, what I did in a research project which I concluded a little while ago was to conduct ethnographic interviews with individuals who had engaged in political violence in Egypt and Germany. In Egypt, I interviewed members of two groups that are called Al-Jihad and Al-Jama'a al-Islamiyya, which are widely considered the forerunners of Al-Qaeda. And in Germany, I interviewed members of the Baader-Meinhof group, which I assume most of you would be familiar with. So what I did was to ask them about their life stories. We met several times and they explained to me their life stories and how they made decisions to pick up arms. And then I conducted an analysis of these histories, and I identified many factors that these individuals mentioned related to their decisions why they decided to pick up arms. And many of these factors were what you could have expected from the existing literature. For example, beliefs about Islam, friendships with other members of violent groups, also poor economic living conditions in their environment, etc. And they mentioned a very large number of factors, which is why I also conducted a computation analysis And I moreover had a control group of non-violent individuals, and in the slide you also see two non-violent individuals, this one on the right. These are two non-violent individuals with whom I also compared the life histories of violent individuals. And of this very complex computational analysis, with which I won't bore you, the main findings were the following. And now I have another slide. Number one, I found that violent and non-violent individuals, when making decisions about whether to engage in violent or non-violent activism, are motivated by surprisingly similar factors. Now, what these factors are, I'll tell you more on the next slide. Number two, I find that there are no significant differences between Muslims and non-Muslims who engage in violence. So what I find is that Muslims use Islam as a justification, of course, this will resonate with everyone in this room, but they're really reacting to something else. And here's my next slide, thank you. So the main motivator of decisions to engage in political violence, which I find in my analysis, is perceived state aggression. And here I have a few quotes from my interviews. So one individual said, the state attacked me and threatened my children. Another individual said, it was normal that the police bat came down on my head. And I have numerous dozens of similar quotes. And then in this computational analysis, which I had something like hundreds of thousands of runs, I also simulated decisions to pick up arms. And this simulation showed that perceived state aggression is so important that it can motivate individuals to pick up arms even if they hold no beliefs whatsoever about Islam. On the contrary, beliefs about Islam by themselves are never sufficient to motivate individuals to pick up arms unless we add perceived state aggression. Those are the main findings. Now, how do these findings speak to recent violence in Europe? So here we have, so when I'm reading the news, I find some similarities, which are quite superficial and anecdotal at this stage. I have not yet conducted a thorough analysis of these. So here you would find one of the attackers in Bataclan shouting, "This is for Syria," or the most recent perpetrator of the Paris attacks is believed to have wanted to kill police officers to avenge Muslims killed in Syria. So such quotes, of course, also suggest that perceived state aggression could matter in recent violence, which we see in Europe. Whether that's actually the case is something I'm going to investigate in a new research project, which I'm only beginning now. So I can't tell you about that, maybe I'll be back to do that later. But what the findings of my current research, about which I've just told you, suggest is that number one, it's highly unlikely that the recent attacks we've seen are mainly motivated by Islam. What my findings suggest is that yes, Islam is probably used as a justification, but it's probably not the main motivation. And of course, related to what others have said before me today, that means that thinking about what we're currently witnessing as just the result of a radical ideology seems to be an insufficient approach that cannot capture the heart of the problem. Now my findings also have other implications, and here I have another slide, on the war on ISIS, which is currently happening on the ground in Iraq and Syria. So my findings suggest that the current experience of violence by people in Syria and in Iraq could motivate new individuals to pick up arms and form new violent groups after ISIS has been defeated. And number two, here I have another slide which is not nice to look at. My findings also suggest that the real danger related to violence originating in the Middle East is not ISIS. Rather, it's the experience of perceived state aggression by citizens who are living in the Arab world, who are facing repressive measures by the state. So here you see a protester in Egypt who was peacefully protesting and then attacked by the security forces. According to Human Rights Watch, just in Egypt alone, thousands of political opponents have been made disappear, that's what it's called. According to the Anadim Center of Torture, the victims of torture, which was recently closed in February, hundreds were brutally tortured just last year. My own colleague, Giulio Regeni, who was conducting his PhD at Cambridge University, was brutally tortured to death a few years ago. So these are some of the reports we are hearing just related to Egypt. The response of Western states
Two of these reports is to approve military aid. The United States has sent $6.5 billion in military aid to Egypt alone. The EU had actually issued an arms embargo on weapons sold to Egypt because of reports of human rights violations, but this was disregarded by 12 EU members who issued $6.7 billion in weapons license just the following year after the embargo was issued. And what my research suggests is that this kind of policy adopted is very likely to result in more violence in those Arab countries that are affected on the ground, which could then, of course, also easily come back to us here in Europe.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. That was really important points that you made, and the research is really great. And thank you, Gerry. Comments, especially that what really stuck in my mind was when you say license the preachers, license to practice. You know, we have everything we do, you know, as education, we go through a system and we get certified, but there is no such a thing as a preacher gets a license to practice. So we need to look in that. But I will not go into details. First of all, I would like to let Dr. Azmaish for his speech. Dr. Azmaish, there is something that before you start your speech, with regards to the crisis that we are facing in the Western society regarding Islamic radicalisation. Some say that these crises are rooted to the Quran, while your previous speeches, you claim that Quran is a book that is absolutely compatible with human rights values and is adaptable to the modern society. How is this possible? And is it possible to use Quran as a tool to counteract Islamic extremism?
Thank you very much to organize this gathering. Thank you, Geoffrey, very much to organize and to help this gathering. And so what I would like to explain, so I prepared something to say, but it was said, a lot of things was said by other lecturers. So before entering in the core of the lecture, I would like to explain about 1 or 2 points about the community. In Arabic language, the equivalent word for community is ummat. And ummat is the name of a group of people who are oriented all together in one direction. And they are following a leader who is named Imam. So Ummat and Imam, they are together as 2 hemispheres which make one circle, one sphere. So this is very important. Why it is important? Because from the moment that somebody accepts the authority of an Imam upon his head, he accepts the hegemony of that person upon him and submission of himself to that Imam. So this is the seed of the problem. There is 2 phases how a person become radicalized and pass into the action as a terrorist. How a person is radicalized. So people who are living, who are coming as the migratory mass from Syria, from Iraq, from other countries, they are coming here in Europe, in different countries. They are welcomed, of course, and they are living with each other. But the problem is that if they stop doing everything, they don't forget regularly to do one thing, to participate, to attend in the ceremony of the Friday praying. So it is very important to know that Friday praying is not a religious ritual. at all. And this is the seed of the problem. It is a political ritual done by a religious man. And because it is done by a religious person, people, they think that it is a religious ceremony and a religious ritual. So it means that during the Friday praying, it happened two things. The difference between Friday praying and the ordinary praying that every Muslim does in his house or etc. is that Friday prayer is done in company of the preachers, two preachers. It is prayer and preachers. So the imam is not only the leader of prayer, he is the preacher and he is preaching. So the problem is coming from the content of the preach. First of all, the imam, they know how to talk with the ummah, with the group of people who accept the hegemony of imam upon them. It is important to take in consideration this hegemony, because from the moment that you accept the hegemony of somebody upon your mind stops thinking, stops functioning. From this moment, they don't need this group of people, they don't need to refer to the Quran, to go and to look into the Quran. They do, or they stop doing something, and when you ask them why you don't do or you do, they say because Imam says, the leader of the prayer. Because they are trustful to him, because they accept his hegemony. He has the authority because he is Imam. He is placed in the place of Imam. And on the tribune of Friday praying, often it is written visibly, black and white, or invisibly, that Imam replaces Prophet Muhammad. Imam has the place that Prophet Muhammad has. It is the leader of praying people. This is the problem. So when Imam says something as he is talking about the revelation, it is just like the verses. He doesn't need to refer to Quran in order to justify what he is talking about. It is enough that something be said by Imam. And why Imam says in this moment? He says, brothers and sisters. It's important. It is employing a double language. So brothers and sisters, he means the crowd in front of him, that you are my brothers and my sisters. I don't talk to everybody, just to my brothers and sisters. So he put a wall, invisible wall, in order to separate between this group, this community, and the society, not to let them to be integrated culturally into the society. Brothers and sisters, be aware that we are living in a corrupted society. In this society that we came, we must be more careful about education of our children. Because in this society, the relationship is free between men and women. They are kissing each other. They are shaking the hand of each other. They go to restaurants to eat meat with pork. It is forbidden for us. they drink alcohol, so we cannot, it is not possible for us to go to the same restaurant. We must take care of our children, how they wear. Our daughters should take the chador, the hijab, etc. If they don't do, they will be corrupted by the society, because this society is not a healthy society. So it is what is said, but not so directly as I am talking to you. It is the Imam is able to use a double language. He knows how to talk and how to pass this message. So by this, bit by bit, people, the audience of the Imam, they take distance from the society and get a negative impression about the society in which they are living. So already the fact that the political speech is given to the people by a religious man, it is a violation of the constitutional law in the democratic societies which are based on secularism or laicity. So already it is very important that a religious speech should be carried on by a religious man, a political speech by a political person. And from other side, in place to say to the audience that we should be very respectful to this society who accepted us with a lot of kindness and gave to our children the equal possibilities with their own children to go to the school, to have the medical care, etc., etc. They are spreading the seed of the hate in the heart of the audience. So they become full of hate, bit by bit, and very, 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 very angry, more and more and more and more. So they go to the road of radicalization. When they are full of hate and they pass, for example, next to a club of bisexual people and they have 4 children already in their house, all of a sudden something comes in their mind that my children will be corrupted by this society, which doesn't respect the order as it should be. And he entered and killed all of the people who are there. So it happened. It happened 2 times. Once in USA and once in Europe. So they get the message to passing action via internet somewhere else. They are inspired from out of the borders. But already they are radicalized by this hidden mechanism of the Friday praying. In all of this, you don't find any relationship between what is happening in this process and the Quran. The Imam doesn't refer at all to the Quran, but to the moral according to his point of view. It means that even if Prophet Muhammad today was there and he had the Quran in his hand, he couldn't solve the problem of radicalization. Because the concept of ummat and imamat is misused, and it is not a new problem. This problem exists just in the life period of Prophet Muhammad. It was a group of Muslims, a group of people attached to the tribal tradition and converted to Islam. They started to build the mosque. In the Quran, These group of false Muslims are named al-munafiqun, the hypocrite persons. So they made the mosque, and they invited Prophet Muhammad to go and inaugurate their mosque. But they had bad intention. They wouldn't like to lead, to guide those who would like to pray, but they would like to preach those people against the values of the Quran in benefit of the tribal traditions. So Muhammad got order from Gabriel to go and to close the door of those kind of mosques. So it is not new, this problem. It is as old as Islam. It is because of this that from the beginning, two versions of Islam was born in the same city in presence of Prophet Muhammad till now. So what is important is to differentiate and not to think, not at all to think about the Quran as the source of problem or as the solution for the problem. With the Quran, it is possible to create a virtuous society full of salam, peace, health, love, tolerance. But this problem doesn't come and it is not related to the Quran. So, in the conclusion, I will talk more about this. Thank you very much.
Very much. We have a very short time and we're going to break for lunch. So if you have got more questions, there is more time. So I'll maybe have one or two questions. So please, yes. We've got time for 2 questions.
Can I abuse my last question?
Yes, you may.
I have to say, it was refreshing to hear Stephanie's intervention. I somewhat take issue with it. I don't accept the argument about state violence. I remember well, Father Meinhof, the Marxist vision of stripping the facade of democracy and exposing the fascist state underneath. This is what they said they were doing. Through violence, they removed the facade of democracy and exposed the fascist state underneath. And of course, the Baader Meinhof were trained and equipped in Marxist East Germany, the real fascist state. So, these are the sorts of people that we're dealing with, and I don't buy into these sort of excuses. But when you talk about the perception of state aggression, where do they get the perception from? And I think we heard from Dr. Mattie that, of course, people are telling them what perception they need. So many of these perpetrators are not sophisticated philosophers of Islam or indeed political ideology. Often they are simple people, but they've been told certain things. And so they go out and they act violently and they think they have a justification. But I suppose I did have a question, literally. And my question was, and really going back to what Gerry was talking about, this question of communities. Because you see, in our Western societies, actually, many of us talk about not communities, but the rights, the responsibilities and duties of the individual. Each of us is a citizen who, in his own right, is responsible for his actions. We're not members of a community. Now, at what stage are we going to break this link where we have new people who've come into our society? We want to fully integrate them. When are they going to stop then operating under the umbrella of a community and act as individuals with all the rights, privileges and duties of individuals. And I just wonder if we're not overly deferential towards communities and community leaders, many of whom have their own agenda.
The role of communities in defeating radicalisation, extremism and so many other forms of crime is absolutely fundamental. But going back to some of my earlier comments, it is absolutely about the honesty of the conversation. And there's something about rules, regulations, values, shared understanding of values, which are absolutely critical. There is a professional and moral imperative to act. We cannot shy away from, particularly those who work for government and in other professions, cannot shy away from making difficult but nevertheless informed, evidence-based decisions for fear that they are going to be branded racist. Because the very people espousing and using that form of attack are trying to control, in part, the agenda, trying to control the communication. So professionals involved in this work cannot shy away from making those difficult and informed decisions. We can't sit idly by waiting for a consensus around what is the right method or action plan that will seek to prevent and eradicate radicalism. We cannot sit and wait for that consensus because time is something that we do not have. So the imperative to act has got to be by governments, by state, but the imperative to act has got to also be informed. It's got to be the right thing to do. There's got to be some evidence base to what we're doing and why we are doing it. There will always be those individuals and organisations who seek to detract and knock off balance the actions to prevent and safeguard.
Thank you. Thank you
very much. Ms. Rodkin. So no, I know that people might take issue with this argument. So all I can say is really this is not an opinion. It's based on a solid empirical research project. So here I'm really using quotes, as you've seen, by what Baader-Meinhof and the jihadi said, and I was personally very surprised by my findings. I did not anticipate to find this at all. I thought I would be able to clearly differentiate Muslims who engage in violence from Baader-Meinhof. That's what I expected to find. And I myself was astonished about these findings, and I've tested them a lot, you can believe me that. So this is what I found so far. I'm now collecting new life stories, so hopefully that can shed more light on what's really going on. So the term perceived state aggression means that they observed some form of state violence either in their direct environment, meaning a family member, a neighbor, or someone else was beaten up or abducted, something involving violence on behalf of the state, or they heard about it on the news in Germany. That could have been the example of Benno ohne Sorg. That's why I called it perceived state aggression.
Okay.
So thank you very much. It's a very interesting conference. My name is Stella Lely. I have studied physics and informatics and biocities, so I have a very important question from the woman from the university. To go to act to kill people in name of God is a brainwash, dangerous religion washing. Nobody can come to me, even if I have a very bad experience with a policeman, to say, you must go to kill another policeman and I help you with my God. Nobody is doing that. So that's, in your research, you must take in consideration that it is a brainwashing here. It's a sectarian religious brainwashing. And to fight against it, you must use anti-sectarian methods. The other one is for Mr. Who speak about Quran. I am a Christian, but I read Quran and I was very surprising that I found nothing that the radical Islamists are saying there. My question is, why you are a scientist, a religious scientist, why you don't put you and all the other scientists together to change or to do in the Quran the changing and to accord this Quran with our new life and because I think it's some difficult to accommodate the Quran with, or not the Quran, the preaching system, you know. I never read in Quran that you cannot change it. So you can do some changes there, you know, to put the Quran to respect our society in this time. It is possible.
So yes, no, I understand your upset, and again I repeat, this is empirical research. This is what I found by carefully coding their own explanations. And the main lesson we learn from engaging, of course we have to be willing, we have to accept that it could be beneficial to us to listen to how the perpetrators of political violence explain why they engage in it. So if you don't think that the perpetrator's perspective is useful, yes, you can just dismiss it. I think I've explained that I think we need to take into account the perspective of the perpetrator of political violence. And then if we do that, and that's what I did in this project, we find that precisely no, it's not Islamist brainwashing, something else is happening here. Those were the findings.
Yes, thank you for your question. So I think by myself that the common point between the terrorists of Baader-Meinhof and the terrorists who are killing under the name of Allah and Islam is that both of them, they are conditioned and they are brainwashed by the brainwashers. So it means that they don't take decision by themselves. They are like the robot. So they are full of hate and they are conditioned and they are ready to pass in action when it is asked from them to do. And this mechanism, so it is an ideological work which is done upon their head, that they are separated from the society inside of a sect full of hate against the society. And they are led from abroad, from other side of the borders of the country. So there is a reason behind of it. Maybe after I will explain more about it. But as I would like to stress more upon this, it has nothing to do with the teachings of the Quran, not at all. You cannot find any relationship between what is said to the radicalized people and the teachings of the Quran. It is very important to take in consideration, as it has nothing to do with Christianity, with Judaism, with Buddhism, with Zoroastrianism, with Yazidi school, etc., etc. So the name of Islam means the process of salam, and salam is health, is the health of the heart. It is a heart healing process. It is the meaning of Islam. So from the beginning to the end, it is full of salam, of peace, of love. So it is a big mistake to think that all of this terrorism which is named religious terrorism, etc., is somehow related with the Quran or the teachings of Prophet Muhammad and spiritual masters such as Jesus or Muhammad or etc. It is a big mistake, and we should be aware not to fall down in the trap of this mistake. It's very important to differentiate between the teachings of the Quran, which invite everybody, regardless his opinion, regardless his gender, regardless his religion, to cohabitate in the same society with each other, so respectfully, because the Quran and the teachings of all of the spiritual masters is based on the respect for human right and right of the citizenship. It's important. And the group of the knowledgeable person about the Quran and the holy text, they are working together in order to bring more light about it in the mind of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. We have got time for just one question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question, and this is for Dr. Azmayesh. I assume that you're speaking about particular communities or particular places where this relationship between Imam and the community is, because I've been a practicing Muslim all my life, and I have attended Friday sermons in hundreds of mosques in the UAE, in Switzerland, in France, in the US, in Morocco, and never once did I feel that I was accepting the hegemony of an imam that was in front of me, or the things that they were preaching. Now, it wasn't always that I accepted what I heard, and yes, I think it can be politically abused. But I've always seen it my entire life as a religious tradition that that is one that comes with a lot of responsibility. So this idea about a license to preach, I think is one that is very interesting to me. In the UAE, and I can tell you my own experience, when I was younger, I would go to mosques and on Friday sermons, depending on where I was, I may actually hear something that I didn't want to say amen to. Now, because UAE took a very controversial step of regulating the Friday sermons, and across the entire UAE on Friday, it is one sermon is delivered across the entire land in every mosque. And this is a sermon that's agreed by a committee and so on. And nowadays, I never have to worry whether I go there with my children or even if they go on their own, that they're going to hear something that they don't want to say amen to. So I would like to have you please clarify. There are, I'm assuming, certain societies where this kind of relationship happens.
Many thanks for this clarification. It is exactly the solution, because first I try to explain the problem, and after, when we are going to talk about the solution, it is the solution. The solution is that the Friday praying imam in your country, they are following the preach which is given to them writtenly by a center. So there is not anarchism. So they know what to say and what not to say. Because the government, they know what is the danger when there is an anarchism and everybody as an imam can come from Somalia, from Mali, from everywhere in the world, Yemen, etc., and talk to the people and say whatever he would like to say. They give the preach, the content of the preach is absolutely written by the government and by the center of Hidayat. So it brings together the heart to each other and spread the seed of fraternity between them. It is very important, and it is the good example, the best example. That I would like to explain.
Thank you very much. No, but I would say it is one solution. It is one example, and I think there are others that can be followed, because as you can imagine, like I said, it was very controversial in the UAE. It raises questions about, freedom of speech and so on, and I think that there are perhaps, it is a solution, but there are perhaps other solutions that should be explored, but thank you.
I think we will wrap up for lunch, and we will be back. What time? 2:15. So if you'll get back for 2:15, and the next session will be about our conclusion and solution. Okay? Thank you.